of KLAV. Welcome to Aspects of Writing with your host, James Kelly. For the next 60 minutes, we'll explore every aspect of writing, including how to create, format, and even sell your work. The phone lines are open at 731-1230. That's 731-1230. Or toll free 1-866-820-KLAV. Now, let's get right. Here's your host, James Kelly.
Hello and welcome to Aspects of Writing here on KLAV. I'm your host, James Kelly. On your computer, you can listen to this broadcast live at KLAV1230am.com. The topic of today's show is writing through adversity, and our guest for today's show is author Rob Miech. Rob's latest book is 11th Heaven. But before we get to Rob, and my panel and I would like to read a few fun quotes about today's topic. And Jan, would you like to start?
I certainly would. In times like these, it's good to remember there have always been times like these. Paul Harvey, American radio personality. We know him.
Yeah. And Rob?
You hear about how many fourth quarter comebacks that a guy has, and I think it means a guy screwed up in the first three quarters. That is Denver Broncos great quarterback Peyton Manning.
Yeah. And Dana?
She's not online.
Oh, she's not online. Okay, well, we're waiting for Dana to call in. Read Dana's life is a series of experiences, each one of which makes us bigger, even though sometimes it is hard to realize this. For the world was built to develop character, and we must learn that the setbacks and grievous that we endure help us in our marching forward. And that was Henry Ford, founder of the Ford Motor Company. Another quote is, in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity, and that was Albert Einstein. If you are just tuning in, you are listening to Aspects of Writing with me, your host, James Kelly, here on KLAV, along with my co-host, Dana Micheli, we hope, and Janet Coursey. On your computer, again, you can listen to this broadcast live at KLAV1230am.com. Our guest for today's show is author Rob Miech. Rob wrote the book The Last Natural. It was a hardback version that came out in 2012. The paperback version was called The Phenom, and this book is about the behind-the-scenes story of the 2010 junior college basketball season that launched Bryce Harper to fame and fortune. Bryce was the Natural League Rookie of the Year in 2012, and he was an all-star. Yeah, I'll spit it out. Maybe I need a drink. Yeah, selection in 2012 and 2013. Rob Miech's latest book, 11th Heaven, is about Ed O'Bannon, the power forward for the 1995 National Basketball Champions UCLA Bruins. Today, because we are talking about writing through adversity, we're going to get right to it. So, Jan, do you have a question for Rob?
I've got a bunch of questions for him, but let's start with this one. Rob, tell us about yourself. Where are you from, and where'd you grow up? Brothers, sisters, mom, dad? What's cooking?
You are looking at the original mutt right here. I was born in Milwaukee, and at an early age we moved to Ohio. Grew up through there, and after my freshman year of high school, we moved to Los Angeles. Culture shock of culture shock.
I bet it was.
I'll spare you many of the details you can just imagine, and you're probably right. I have an older brother, about a year and a half, younger sister, who thankfully lives in Orange County, right across the highway from my mom, and she has a husband and two kids, so that keeps my mom busy. I went to San Diego State, and I guess I should tell you that I moved around a lot. My dad was riding the corporate ladder as I grew up.
Oh.
And one stretch I went to 9 schools in 10 years.
Wow.
Some of that was normal matriculation, but a lot of that was 2 years and move, 2 years and move, 2 years and move. So ultimately, when I went to San Diego State, that was after going to 2 different junior colleges. So I really consider the start of my life almost San Diego State.
Uh-huh.
And that's where I studied journalism and got on the school paper, worked a bit at the San Diego section of the LA Times, which no longer exists. And then I started swimming upstream in the great world of journalism.
Aha. That sounds so interesting.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit later, Rob, but I know you were published with your first book to St. Martin's Griffin, and we're going to talk about, I'm just curious about why you decided to self-publish. Now, you can answer a little bit of that now, or you can hold off to later if you like.
Yeah, I know we're going to get to some details of that a little bit later, but St. Martin's published the Bryce Harper baseball book, The Last Natural, in 2012. Thankful to them. I had a year into that project before I actually had a contract with the publisher, and it happened to be St. Martin's Griffin, which worked out wonderfully. It taught me a lot. There was some adversity. There was some issues. but every time I stub my toe in that process, I can look back now and be grateful for it, because it taught me what I needed to know to do the self-publishing book on Ed O'Bannon and the '95 UCLA Bruins. So while there was some speed bumps there, it's the topic of our discussion today, but the adversity was priceless.
Yeah. Now, Dana's just now joined us from New York. Dana, we already asked him the question about St. Martin's Press. Do you have any questions for Rob?
I'm sorry. First of all, I had technical issues, but I kind of missed most of what Rob said. So at the moment, I'm just gonna
waiver that, huh? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then let's just get right to it. I want to tell Rob's story in chronological order. We discussed this before coming on the show, and the reason is because we are talking about writing through adversity, and I think it's important to understand what you went through to get to this point with your latest book.
Yeah, thanks.
So in April 1995, something happened that would have, at the time, be a devastating effect on your career as a writer. So can you please tell us what it was and what it was like?
You bet. When I got out of San Diego State in '87, I toiled at a couple real small newspapers for 3 years. And then in August 1990, I got the job at the Pasadena Star-News covering UCLA football and basketball, which was critical to my life, to this book, to everything. And it was really interesting. I've told you, James, that my first story at the Pasadena Star-News was about Ed O'Bannon and how he switched his basketball commitment from UNLV, where he had given an oral commitment in May 1990, to UCLA in August 1990. So my first story was about Ed O'Bannon and this National High School Player of the Year switching from UNLV to UCLA, and how it was going to be such a windfall for UCLA. We can flash forward to April '95, and they won the national championship in Seattle. I detail all of Ed's adversity throughout his whole career at UCLA, throughout the book. You talk about adversity. He switches his commitment to UCLA in August 1990, and on October 9th, 1990, he tears apart his left knee in a pickup game at UCLA, 6 days before the official start of practice.
Oh.
And so it took him 2+ years to regain some semblance of his previous form. He did that, and every ounce and every step of his climb back is detailed in the book, which I was so fortunate that he bared his soul to me.
Well, this is why I like you being on the show today.
Yeah.
One, because we are talking about the adversity that you were going to hit on in a few minutes,
Right.
that you went through to get to this point, to write your latest book, 11th Heaven, and then paralleling Ed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing.
It really does. It's so intertwined. Forgive me if I go off on tangents, but we'll come back to them. And it really is amazing. And driving over here today, I thought about the topic and adversity and what we were going to talk about, and it was just so amazing that with adversity comes good fortune.
Right.
And there's a flip side, and hopefully there's a flip side, and hopefully you've learned some things that can turn that lemon into lemonade. That's a coach's cliche that I've heard for decades, but that's the point of life, is turning lemon into lemonade.
And that's why I like that we're talking about Ed O'Bannon, because of the fact that, adversity isn't just in us as writers.
Right.
We seem to say that there's so much we have to go through to make it as a successful author. But everyone faces adversity. At some point in their life, they're going to face something, and that's adverse.
Right.
So, and he certainly has been through a lot.
He has, and in April '95, they had just won the national championship in Seattle. Coincidentally, at the Final Four in Seattle, the NCAA annually gives out a media gift to writers and broadcasters at its Final Four event. They've got so much money, so they figure they'd spoon a little bit back at the commoners. So the gift in Seattle in 1995 was a black media bag, computer bag, with the colorful Seattle Final Four logo on the side. It was, for me, it was a windfall, because in January, very early January '95, I had talked to the coach, Jim Herrick, after a practice about possibly doing a book about the season if it goes a certain way.
Right.
The season had started very well, and I just extrapolated that, if these guys keep kicking tail, if it goes a certain way, I would like to write a book about that. And I presented that idea to Jim Herrick, the coach, after a January practice. And he goes, he had a West Virginia slang, and he never called the writers by their real name. So he twisted my name from Mish to Minch.
Okay.
Tim Kawakami covered the team for the LA Times, and Herrick called him Kamakawi. So it was his own little dig or twist at writers and whatnot. And so I present the idea of the book to him, and he says, Minch, that's okay. You don't need my help for that. And I go, no, but I would. If it goes a certain way right after the season, I would need a lot of your time, filling in some cracks. I need some behind-the-scenes stuff. I would need a lot of your time. Could I have a lot of your time? And he shook my hand. So this was early January 1995. Flash forward to April 5th, 1995. For January, February, for the last 4 months, I had been gathering stuff for the purposes of doing a book, not just doing interviews with guys after games or after practices for a specific newspaper article for the next day. I wasn't just asking them 3 questions. I was asking them 50 questions.
Yeah, right.
I was going back to their lives, how they got to UCLA, their high school careers. So my point of all that is April 5th, 1995, we come back from Seattle and we go to Pauley Pavilion for a student celebration. There's 13,000 people in the arena. I walk in with my new media bag that for the first time all season contains everything I need for the book. It contains a computer, probably 15 to 20 notepads with all kinds of details. It contains mini cassettes, back when we had mini cassette recorders.
Some people, what is that?
What's that?
All of those mini cassettes were in that bag. All of my interviews with all the guys. I had contacts for publishers and agents. Everything you could ever imagine pertaining to the book was in that bag. I walk into the arena. I slip it underneath the courtside table where I always sat for games, but it wasn't a game. So the media official did not drape tablecloths over the deal. So it was just a bare table. And the point of that is anybody walking by could easily see what's under the table.
Right.
So right after the thing, I go talk to Ed for 2 minutes to ask him 2 questions about this celebration, the cap to his fantastic achievement. And
we're talking about Ed O'Bannon.
Ed O'Bannon, and it was probably 2 or 3 minutes tops. I go back to my courtside table, and someone had ripped off that bag.
Oh my God.
Oh, wow.
And we all know what it's like as a writer. How do you recreate any of this? You can't.
Yeah. It was at the time. It was absolutely devastating. I did a triple take. I ran outside on campus. I started looking for someone carrying that bag. Thank God I didn't find him.
Yeah.
But if I saw him today, there is no doubt that I would give him 2 20s and a hug.
Yeah.
Because he did me a favor. Having written the Bryce Harper book, I know exactly what it entails and what it takes to write a book. And I can tell you flat out that going back to me in April 95, I didn't have it in me. And I certainly didn't have it in me to do it justice and to do it right. Mm-hmm. So, big lesson. And that mattered because Ed saw my face right after it was stolen and just completely ashen, completely no blood, no life. I was devastated. And so come December 1st, 2012, and I know we'll get to this, but I had finished my responsibilities for an extra chapter for the Bryce Harper paperback book. Mm-hmm. December 1, 2012, I was going to hibernate for 3 months. I was so exhausted. But I also knew I had a keen sense at that time of the process of writing a book, what it takes, when you need to sell the manuscript, what the timeline is for the publisher to produce it, to distribute it, to get it out among the people. And so I knew on December 1, 2012, I had to approach Ed and ask him about doing this UCLA book on 95 because I needed to start it then. I knew that for it to come out on October 15th, 2014, the 20th anniversary to the day of the start of practice for the title season, which I was shooting for all along, I knew I needed Ed's help, or else the book no way could be attempted. After explaining myself for 2 hours and what I might want to do and what I might need from him, he stood up and he told me how he will never forget how the blood had left my face and how ashen my mug was on April 5th, 1995, when that computer bag was stolen. So he shook my hand and he said, I'm in.
You know, that's interesting because we're talking 12 years, 13 years later, that your paths would cross again.
Yep. Absolutely. And it was, I don't know about meant to be or stars or karma or what it all means, but all I can tell you personally and selfishly is this is the work of my life. It was the most unfinished business of my life. And this one, I think, unlike the Bryce Harper book, this one contains big chunks of my heart and soul.
Yeah. And this would not have happened the way it has now had your incident not happened in 1995.
Absolutely.
So the lesson behind this is just get through the adversity and keep going forward. You never know what path you're on and where you're going to be led.
Know your compass is right and accurate, and trust yourself, and you better have a hell of a lot of passion also.
Absolutely. So when we're going to go back to 2009, we're skipping from 1995 to 2009.
Yep, here it comes.
Oh, yeah. You faced a little bit of adversity there as well. You want to share that?
Again, December 1st, 2009. December 1st.
Yeah, there's something about December 1st.
That was the layoff of all layoffs at the Las Vegas Sun. Now, I've been a sports writer since '87, and I can tell you for a fact that journalism has been quite a crappy industry for about 20 years.
Thanks.
So, and I told you I'm not going to mince my words, and I can go back so long to when layoffs started and when they really started making stupid decisions, and a lot of good people paid for those stupid decisions. And fortunately, by December 1, '09, when the Las Vegas Sun had its bloodbath round of layoffs, I had been laid off previously in '01 by CBS Sportsline. And when that happens to you for the first time, it's almost like getting your computer bag ripped off. I'm sure my face was a little ashen in '01 when it happened, but again, it was priceless, and I would not regret anything that's happened to me in my life or career. That taught me a lot. That this is not good right now, but keep believing in yourself, and something good, if not better, will likely be right around the corner, if not great. And so when that layoff happened at the Las Vegas Sun, I instantly felt so bad for everybody else who got the axe, because there was a lot of good people there who'd been there a long time. They bled Las Vegas Sun Inc. And because of the poor decisions of the guy at the top, Brian Greenspun, a lot of good people paid for it. And that was, I didn't care about myself. I knew I'd be fine. I knew I was going to find a niche. I'll swim upstream and figure something out. It wasn't about me at all, but there's a lot of good people. We talked about this before the show, too, that there's a lot of good people out there who have been put in real bad positions because of that move, because of someone's mistakes, and they don't have a voice. They can't talk. So this isn't the first time I've talked about that on a radio show, and I think it's important. So,
well, what's interesting is what happened a month later.
1 month later, here we go. Yeah. Fortunately, I have a incredible relationship with baseball coach Tim Chambers, who at that time was coaching the College of Southern Nevada. I also have to thank the beginning of Vegas 7 magazine, a weekly magazine that is pretty top-notch in the city. It started right about that point. They wanted me to do some sports stuff for them. And one thing I suggested was doing something over at CSN on this young 17-year-old baseball player named Bryce Harper. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated at 16. A lot was expected of him. Tons of expectations. Almost like nobody else in the history of the game. That's how much of a niche he was trying to prove. And to prove he was the #1 draft pick in the nation, he left Las Vegas High School after his sophomore year to play the 2010 season at CSN. So I go over to CSN to talk to Chambers and some players about Bryce and this incredible transition he's making from a sophomore in high school to a freshman in junior college, 17-year-old kid who's going to be playing against 19, 20, 21, 22-year-olds. So I spit out a 500, 600-word story for Vegas 7, and it came out, and I thought about it for a couple of days, and something kind of just struck me like lightning, that Chambers told me repeatedly that this was going to be a one-off. This is going to be a season like no other season. It's never happened before and will never happen again, what this guy's trying to accomplish. So I went into Chambers' office one morning and I said, Skip, you said this is going to be such an extraordinary season. Should every day of it be chronicled? He goes, what are you thinking? I said, Skip, you say it's going to be so extraordinary. Should every day be documented? And he goes, you're in. he stood up, shook my hand. He goes, "You're in the dugout for games. You're in the coach for road trips." To make a very long story short, The Last Natural is the inside story about that season that launched Bryce to fame and fortune. He became the #1 draft pick by the Washington Nationals by way of his 31 home runs that season, which led the country. No player at a 2-year or 4-year college had 31 home runs. Bryce did it with a wooden bat,
and an $11 million contract.
Signed an $11 million deal with Washington, and he's probably on the brink in the next year, maybe 18 months of inking something really major with Washington. So that's something to keep your eye on.
Did I read something about he had only played with a metal bat until that season?
He did, but then there was some club tournaments, some pretty elite national club tournaments that he participated in that he would use wood. And everybody else is using metal, and he would use wood. Because he wanted to show scouts, look what I can do. Look,
he knew where he was going.
Absolutely. And you know, he's had a tough road. He's had a lot of critics on him. He's not exactly Mike Trout. People love to compare him to Mike Trout. But my thinking is, and I'm sorry, here we are getting off on a tangent.
No, that's right. But we'll get back.
Mike Trout was not on Sports Illustrated's cover when he was 16. He was not a #1 draft pick. So you can compare the two if you want, if you're on a radio show and you've got an hour to kill like many have in the last 2 years. But the point is, nobody in the history of the game went into the game with the pressure and expectations that Bryce Harper did. And I was just extremely fortunate to be able to capture that last amateur season that really launched him.
Mm-hmm. So now we're going to move forward to December 12th, or December 1st, 2012. You had just completed the paperback version of, we're going to really get into that in a few minutes, because you have an unusual situation here. The Last Natural, also, that was the hardback version?
Last Natural was hardback. That came out in 2012, and then during the entire 2012 year, I kept pace with what Bryce was doing and how he was doing, because the publisher wanted an extra chapter for the paperback version to make it updated. It's pretty slick what they did. The paperback, they were able to design on top of it 2012 NL Rookie of the Year. So the paperback was an updated version of the hardback, as is done in the industry. And so by the end of that season in 2012, which ended dramatically in the playoffs for him, I had about 17,000 words that I had gathered. They only wanted 5,000. So I took a few weeks to whittle it down and only keep the best stuff, sent it off, and then all my responsibilities for the Harper paperback were completed right on the eve of December 1, 2012, which is when I was really going to hibernate for 3 or 4 months, because I was just dead, just mentally exhausted like I'd never been in my life. But I also knew at that point the timetable of the publishing industry, when you had to complete manuscript so that the book could actually come out by X date.
Right.
All of that was clear in my head. So as I was finishing the additional chapter in 2012, I was keeping an index card next to my computer, and I was always updating it every month with what would I maybe want to do next. And always at the top of that index card was UCLA 95. UCLA 95. It was always the next thing that I needed to do for so many reasons that we've already discussed. And so on December of 12, I drove down to Ed's dealership. He works at Findlay Toyota. He's been there, I want to say, about 6 or 7 years. He's risen to a prominent spot in promotions and marketing, but he is never, ever above going out on the pavement on a 115-degree summer day and trying to help someone buy a car. He is one of the most standout people I have ever met. December 1, 2012, I went into his office unannounced, and I kind of explained to him what I might want to do with the UCLA book and how he was so important and critical to that team in that season. He would be just as important to a book about that team. And if he didn't want to participate, there's no way I could attempt it. Just absolutely no way. So that 2-hour spiel to him was critical for this book. And at the end of it, he stood up and he goes, "Yeah, Rob, my story hasn't been told. Our stories haven't been told." He knew this would be a conduit to his teammates' stories being told, and he knew if he wasn't in, that doesn't get published. And that's when he shook my hand, and of course he remembered my face in April 95 also.
Well, that's one of the things I want to talk about with your book, because this is really what the book is about, is that when Ed O'Bannon stood up basically to basketball league, or sorry, yeah, basketball. And he basically, I know nothing about sports.
That's okay. Well, like I told
we had a conversation for an hour and a half and I know nothing.
Right. That's okay. I can tell your listeners about this, and it's not that big a deal. You had some trepidation about talking about something that was so sports heavy and sports centric.
Yeah, because he stood up.
But the point is that I said to you was that's not the issue. The deal is we're just talking about people. It's just people going through issues and problems, and how do they conquer them and get past them, and sometimes, like Ed, in a very big time way.
Mm-hmm. So let's go into what he's been facing. That's why he's working where he is now.
His pro career ended when he was in Eugene, Oregon. He was trying out for a Chinese league, and nobody there knew him. Nobody there knew what he had done, and it was that day that he left his black Nike high tops on his dormitory bed. And if you've ever played basketball, there's nothing more important to you than your high tops. And so once he did that symbolic deal, he was good with his career being over. And the larger point you're alluding to is the fact that this team in '95 at UCLA was so dynamic. With the passage of time, I do this in detail, and I won't bore you or your listeners with this, but that team really, really stands out as one of the all-time greatest in many statistical ways, because of that and because of his teammates and because of their cohesiveness and what they did. It's really one for the ages. And so the dichotomy is that the six main players, Ed and Charles O'Bannon, Toby Bailey, J.R. Henderson, George Zedek, and Tyus Edney. Also, Cameron Dollar was the seventh, and he played a crucial role in the final game against Arkansas, filling in for Tyus Edney at the point. But the issue is those six guys I previously mentioned were all drafted by the NBA. They all dreamt of stardom and millions and whatnot, and none of them made it. They all were sent abroad to play basketball. And if anybody's been to Eastern Europe, that's not exactly fun. And they all were extremely challenged. And the point is that all of that made every one of them better people. Mm-hmm. And just because you go to the NBA and you make tens of millions, you might win you be elected to some all-star games, and you might win some titles. That doesn't make you a class person or give you character. It's what's inside you. And each one of these guys had such adventures that their stories are better for it.
But in particular with Ed, we were talking about a court case that is, you were just mentioning before we went on air, actually, that they actually had some settlement in August of this year.
Right. He started working for Finley Toyota about '06, and that's a whole other story that I get into really well in the book. Ed really bared his soul to him, and I can never thank him enough. But he was the only person of about a dozen people approached by Sonny Vaccaro to be the face of this lawsuit against the NCAA. The case was filed in Northern California in August 1990. It was a few months earlier, 2009. August 2009, the lawsuit was filed in Northern California. It was a few months earlier where Ed was going to a UNLV game. He was stopping off at his buddy's house in Summerlin, Michael Curtis, who was a rock-on player in his past at UNLV. Ed goes to pick up Michael to go to this game, but Michael is just finishing dressing. He's upstairs. Ed sits down on a couch and watches Curtis's two kids play this video game. It's an EA Sports game. One of the kids is UCLA from '94-'95, and he's controlling this player who looks just like Ed, number 31, bald, left-handed, 6'8", and Ed's looking at himself, just marveling at, what is this? Michael Curtis comes down the stairs and says, he laughs and says, the funny thing is, you're not getting a penny for that, are you? And Ed didn't laugh. And so that was the trigger and the seed of Ed joining this lawsuit and really becoming the face of this lawsuit, Ed O'Bannon versus the NCAA, which was settled just a couple months ago in Ed's favor. So,
and we talked about how this really, he knew it was going to affect his career.
Absolutely.
To go on as a sportscaster or anything else.
And that's why the dozen or so other people who were former college basketball players, that's why they did not agree to be the face of the lawsuit. One of them was Tyus Edney, the point guard of that '94-'95 UCLA team. Well, he knew he couldn't become part of it because he was just starting his career as an assistant coach at UCLA. So that would have totally conflicted with the lawsuit. How can he be part of a lawsuit suing the organization while he's working at a college? It would have spelled the end of the start of his coaching career.
Rob, explain a little bit about what this lawsuit is exactly.
Yeah, it's very complex, and it's really morphed in a bunch of different ways over the years, right up until it went to trial. On the eve of the trial, it switched in complexity to where initially this was going to be a thing that I thought was going to topple the NCAA. I thought they were going to go after past grievances as far as images and likenesses of players being used in video games and on TV and in perpetuity on DVDs for title games and playoffs and whatnot. I thought it was really, really going to be a mega thing that was going to cause the end of the NCAA. But on the eve of the trial, Ed's lawyers took that part of the equation off the table because they wanted a trial by the judge, Claudia Wilken. They didn't want it to go to a jury trial, and then where it could be so up in the air and you didn't know what would happen. So by doing that, they focused only on future gains for elite basketball and football players. What that means is Ed was hoping to get a stipend for the top college basketball and football players at about $5,000 an academic year. It's been settled upon, so that they would get some reimbursement for their images being used on TV and in playoffs.
And that's what this whole suit is about.
That is what it's about.
Images, right?
That's what it got settled into, as opposed to damages being in the neighborhood of billions for past grievances. That got taken off the table. So while it was simplified, it's still pretty big. And Ed's point at every step of the way, he told me, was it wasn't about dollar signs. It was about changing the way the NCAA does business. And in many peripheral ways, that has been altered, and it is changing for the better for these athletes. For instance, many colleges, I think USC started this, and a lot of others are now following into suit. I bet the average person didn't know that a scholarship in the past was a 1-year renewable deal, and every year it was renewed at the volition of the college. It wasn't just a 4 or 5 year complete blanket deal. It was an annual thing that was renewed every June. So because of this lawsuit and its ramifications, USC came to issue scholarships that are now the expanse of a collegiate player's career. 4 or 5 years. It now covers. It's not just an annual thing.
So it's already taken effect.
Already, there's already been effects that can be attributed to this lawsuit and to the legal actions and to colleges and the NCAA being scared. So
as they should be.
Yes, and it's really tilting in the favor of the athletes, and it's going to do so even more.
It should.
Yeah, and for people who don't quite get this, it's the same as if an actor, if someone's using their portrayal for an ad when they did not get permission.
Exactly. Tyus Edney has a fantastic quick story about when he was playing in Lithuania. Somebody, a friend here in the States, sent him a note. Hey, congrats on the commercial. Tyus sends him back a note. Commercial? What commercial? Well, Tyus was featured in a Coke Zero commercial.
Wow.
In the second round of the '95 NCAA tournament, he had a coast-to-coast layup that gave UCLA a victory over Missouri in Boise, Idaho. If you're a college basketball fan, it's one of the plays of the history of the NCAA tournament. So what Coke Zero did is they incorporated Tyus's coast-to-coast layup into their commercial without asking anybody's permission. So Tyus put his lawyers to work, and he got some
residual.
Yeah. So there's one example of people just using an image or using a video or a likeness at their want, and there's nothing fair about that.
No.
I'm surprised a company like Coke would even try to do that. I mean, that's, you know what I mean? You would think they would know better.
Pretty brazen, yes.
Yeah.
You
know what? I think maybe, Dana, what's happened here is that over the years, because this has gone on for years and years and years, that the Basketball Association just assumed we can just continue to do this any way we want, because no one challenged them.
business
Up
as
until
usual.
2009.
Absolutely. And so, and there's many other instances of this that is really making a lot of people, take a closer look at the operations of the NCAA and a lot of people. So it's really having a fantastic effect for the athletes, and already Ed O'Bannon has been considered by some pretty expert minds to be the Curt Flood of college sports. Curt Flood was the guy in the mid-'70s who paved the way for free agency in Major League Baseball, and so that's pretty good company for Ed.
Yeah.
I know nothing about sports, probably less than anyone, but I did see a documentary on Curt Flood on HBO, and that was absolutely fascinating what he did and what he went through.
Incredible. Putting yourself out there like that.
Yes.
Yeah. It takes a lot of fortitude and a lot of guts, and some other words I can't exactly say right now, but Curt Flood and Ed O'Bannon have all of those things.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, it was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
What he went through.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in March of 2014, you had to make a decision. What led up to that decision, and what is that decision you want to tell our listeners?
Yeah.
How's the one with your agent?
Right. I was in New York in May 2013. I had just come back from, and the other thing Ed didn't know when he shook my hand on December 1st, 2012, him agreeing to be part of this project immediately sent me to make reservations for Thailand and Japan and Prague and New York. And I had a real good relationship with everybody from that 94-95 UCLA team, coaches and players. They all were really good to me. And so it was my main objective to see every one of them face to face, to recapture and recount that season and to fill in those blanks that were in that little
that little computer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The first thing I did is I went to UCLA when Ed agreed to be a part of this. I went to UCLA and spent hours upon hours in the sports information department. I got all the box scores from the game, all multiple news stories from each game, and I just laid it out in my office, and I just replayed that season in my head to figure out, okay, what cracks am I missing? And it's amazing what you remember about little stupid things that happen in practice, and so those cracks were filled in by all those guys. It was in May 2013 when I finally talked to my agent in New York, and it was really only then that I knew I had a book. I didn't tell him what I was up to for 6 months because I needed to know it was there. I needed to know that there was a book there, that the guys would help me out, that I could fill in the blanks, and
There's a story worth telling.
Right, and so that's when I met with my agent in May 2013, and I laid it all out to him, and I said, this is what I got. And he seemed interested, but it was very artificial. And he's one of those guys, it was my second time meeting him, and just one of those guys that it just seems like everything I say is going in one ear and out the other. Mm-hmm. And very uncomfortable. When I was very young, my dad taught me two things to keep my mouth shut, because you never know what's going to fly in there. And then the other one was when I talk to you, look at me in the eye. Mm-hmm. And so that was the second time I talked to my agent, and he just couldn't make eye contact with me. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, well, he's game for this. He's gung ho. At least he sounds like he's gung ho. But there's something there. There's something fishy that I don't like, and that came to roost in March 2014 when he, again, now
we're talking about 11th Heaven is what he.
Yes, we're talking about the UCLA book, and at that point I know exactly when a manuscript has to be finished. I know when the publisher is going to take it and put it in its processes and when it can come out. And he was just delaying everything. I wanted an answer on something in 3 days, and it would take him 3 weeks to get back to me. And I also know that industry takes November and December off for the holidays. And so once that happened, once I didn't have a sale by November, I knew he was off. He was in Italy. He was doing it. I was not an issue with him. That's when I first started thinking that, I'm going to have to figure something out here. And in March 2014, I finally just sent him a terse email and said, you know what, this is off the tracks, this is off the rails because of you. I got to fend for myself and figure out how to make this thing
work.
Make it work, but to ensure that the physical book exists on October 15th, 2014. Mm-hmm. For 2 years, that was my target.
Right, and your target goal was The anniversary date.
Right. The first practice, the first official practice of that championship season, and what Ed did in that practice was so dramatic. It's the entire first chapter of the book. So it set the tone for the entire season, and that's why I knew I needed that book to exist. So come March 2014, we should probably back up just a little bit and talk about something else kind of major happening. My dad passed away in January 5th, 2014, and this all plays into itself. It's all kind of a pretty cool story. He had ALS and suffered with that for about 2 years, and so that was going on, and that was extremely difficult to keep my concentration on this. But he was very self-made, and he had to leave Wisconsin-Milwaukee after midway through his college career to begin working in the workforce, and he wound up, talk about adversity, he wound up taking this little assistance job at what was then called Pacific Finance, PF, in Milwaukee, which has morphed into Transamerica Financial Services. So he took this job just to take a job. He was always a numbers whiz, and again, to make a very long story short, he wound up being the president and CEO of Transamerica Financial Services. Ooh. So all that 2 years and move was worth it, and I wouldn't want to change anything about that. He showed me a lot about just doing the job, get it done, do it right.
Go for your dreams.
Right. And so while it was sad what happened to him, I had what he never had. His parents were run over in a car accident when he was 1, and so I had what he never had, a dad for almost 50 years.
Yeah.
March 2014, I part ways with my agent, and I try to figure out how to do this on myself, by myself, self-publishing. I rode all the different companies, and I came up with a fantastic one. Booklocker.com is everything you would ever want if you got guts and passion and want to do something yourself. They are diligent. They do what they say they're going to do, when they're going to do it. But it took a lot of time to find them. And the interesting thing is, I had some issues. Obviously, I had issues with my agent every step of the way. And when I was writing the first draft of the Bryce Harper manuscript, I had a lot of issues that I was running by my dad, and he was telling me that in his best business-like manner that, well, we do this and do that, that's good, this isn't good. But he was also, through that entire process, every 4 or 5 weeks, he was sending me clips or links to stories about the self-publishing world and how it's getting easier and easier and easier to do, and just the most beneficial avenue for authors. And so I can bring you now to March 2014. I'm trying to figure out my own stream, my own avenue, and I figured out it was about 6 weeks ago when BookLocker sent me the first draft or design of the cover of the 11th Heaven, the book about Ed O'Bannon and the 95 Bruins. So the moment I called up that attachment, the cover, it was stunning. It's always stunning to put 2 years into something and then to see some physical
it's going to happen.
It's like, wow, it's real. It really is going to happen. The moment I called up that picture of that cover, I'm not into paranormal stuff very much, but I would swear my dad was behind my right shoulder, and he said one word to me: "See." It was. There you go. It was as if he knew this is the way to do it, the way to go about it. I control everything. Everything about this is better than my first time around, and it was as if 2, 3, 4 years ago he knew it, and he was trying to show me the way. So as I sit here wearing his watch, that's a pretty gratifying story.
But the one thing that you and I talked about the other day was the fact that it is great you're self-publishing, but you have to admit this is a job. You have to become a business person now. You have to put on many hats.
It's extraordinarily difficult. You better have your ducks lined up in every single way, and some that you can't even imagine. For instance, fortunately throughout my career, I've met some very good editors and some very good writers, and those are the people that I had to sift the manuscript through to edit, to correct. And you better have a thick skin, because when you get some recommendations and corrections back, you know they're right. You need that independent input, and you better implement them because they know what they're talking about. You need to have those people lined up because you can't do it yourself. You need other eyes who are critical to look at that stuff.
Absolutely.
Just the other day, I looked at the book's Amazon page, and it has been for sale for about 10 days, and I'm talking about 11th Heaven. and the cover of the book wasn't on there. And this was about 4 or 5 days after it had been up. The book, you could order the book, the cover wasn't there.
Right.
So I had to take steps to get that cover on
Actually,
its
we
page.
discussed that when I spoke to you the other night.
Yeah. And there's just headaches all along the way.
But you know what?
But they can't
right.
be headaches. This is stuff you better tend to.
Yeah, they seem like they're a headache.
Right.
The reality is sometimes there's just those little things that we don't think of, and they seem like they're insurmountable, but they're really easy to fix with a phone call.
Absolutely. My brother just told me today, he sends me a text message, hey, I can finally get it on iBook. And I said, finally, it's been out 10 days. Imagine if you had 22 months into a project.
Yeah.
A day or a few days are so insignificant.
Absolutely.
And I say 22 months, and I've pegged it. Each book took just about $6,500.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a gist of it if you want some terms and time limits and all that.
Well, I think you just surmised what you really go through. You're talking 22 months that you went through to get to this point.
And I'm not married. I don't have kids. It's
so you have all those distractions.
Nothing.
Yeah.
It was weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks of 16-hour days for on end. And that's after the gathering process, interviewing, and then there's the process of outlining and organizing. Then there's the actual writing of it. There's also the editing of it. And there's one more thing. Since we've been talking for about a week, there's one more critical fifth element to all this that has kind of surprised me. It makes sense, but it's still been a surprise that the amount of time that I think I have thought about this, just thinking about it, is intense and invaluable.
Exactly.
I can't tell you how many transition problems I solved just in my dreams from 3 to 4 a.m. and that propels me into the office, and I've got the fix. So not even thinking about it, but even dreaming about it. It has to get so immersed in your synapses to where that's all that's there. And that's how you work out problems.
Yeah, and because that's what happens to me as well.
Yeah.
There'll be many a day I'll trying to figure out something for a cover or whatever for someone, and I'll lay down, I'll go to sleep, and it comes to me. Yeah. It's like, just relax, let it happen.
Yeah. And it's a process, and it takes a while to get there, but it'll come. That's the key. If you can just relax and think about nothing, there it is. Yeah.
I think sometimes when we're forcing ourselves to do something, that's when it's the hardest.
Totally. Absolutely.
Yeah. So this has definitely been a new hat for you to put on when it comes to the business angle, because now you're going to be doing the promoting.
Which I had to do the first time around with the Bryce Harper book.
That's what I want to talk about.
Yeah, well, here's another example. I probably did about 66 interviews from the Bryce Harper book, and I'm talking about the hardback and the paperback. About 66 interviews on radio, TV, podcasts. Of those 66 interviews, how many do you two think the publisher set up?
Maybe 5, 6.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Bingo. It was all about my network, my contacts, who I knew and who they knew.
I'm so glad you just mentioned that, because a lot of times people don't understand that when you're setting up publicity, it is not easy. Mm-hmm. It is very difficult to get into a radio show. I'm a host, but I also promote people sometimes. And the thing is that what I know as for my own show, I do rely on people to come to me sometime and say, I've got this friend who's writing a book, but usually I wait for someone to contact me. Right. And if you don't know how to contact that person, you're dead in the water.
Absolutely. And most writers I have found don't like talking about themselves. I know I don't. I absolutely.
Well, you're going to have to get over that.
I am. Hopefully I've done a decent job with it, but I absolutely abhor it. I can't stand talking about myself or what I do, but you better turn that off, because you have to for this.
Yes,
and hopefully it's interesting and entertaining and worthwhile to have people maybe take a look. You can go to booklocker.com and find the 11th Heaven book there, and they give you the first chapter as a sample, so you can kind of review that. And but it's critical. You have to do it. You have to do so many things to get the word out.
Now, I met you through Debbie with those Barnes & Nobles in Henderson, and you're going to be doing a signing there?
I have a book signing at the Barnes & Noble on Stephanie, Saturday, October 4th from 1 to 3 o'clock. And I specifically picked that date because UNLV football is on the road. Talk about having to think about some details. If there was one person who might have gone to the home UNLV football game that day and not come to the signing if they wanted to, well, I wanted to make sure UNLV was on the road. So if there's anybody who might be interested in that book, then I'll be available and right there to be able to, sign it and talk about it with them.
And, on October 21st, I'm letting you know this as well. I'm going to have Debbie on the show. And I'm going to have Crystal from another Barnes & Noble store on.
Oh, fantastic.
And then we're also going to have two gentlemen who came here from New York who are opening up their own store somewhere around October 1st.
Oh, right downtown.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And so I think that's going to be a great show for all of our listeners to tune into, because we're going to be talking about what it takes as an author, especially a self-published author, to get your book in the store and how to go about it. And I know I'm going to be recording. I'm going to be listening to every word myself because I need that information for myself.
It's tricky. Yep.
Yeah. So that's a whole new experience for you. I know you didn't. Well, you kind of did go through it though. When you didn't have to get your book in the stores, did you?
Well, no. That's the part of it that St. Martin's really tended to, the distribution. There was no issues there, and obviously Bryce Harper's a very Las Vegas angle, and so having done my first signing at Barnes & Noble for The Last Natural, the turnout was fantastic, and so having that relationship really helped this time around. And doing the self-publishing was a little bit of a new angle, but they sloughed it off and said, hey, it's no problem. You're coming out with a book. We can easily get it, and we're going to stock it, and it'll be fun just like the first one. So Debbie and those guys at Barnes & Noble are great.
Yeah.
The few that are left.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're down to the last 2 minutes of the show, and I would like to thank our guest, Rob Miech. He's the author of 11th Heaven. And real quick, Rob, where can they go to get your book?
Well, my website, robmiech.com, that'll be updated very soon with all kinds of pictures and input about the 11th Heaven book. But it is on Amazon. It's on booklocker.com and barnesandnoble.com. So it's all new stuff is being added every day, and it all looks pretty sharp.
Okay. I'd also like to thank Janet Coursey and Dana Micheli, my co-host. Our next live broadcast will be Tuesday, October 7th at 2 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time. For our future guest lineup, please visit my website at aspectsofwriting.com. Aspects of Writing broadcasts live every other Tuesday at 2 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time here on KLAV, 12:30 a.m. on the dial. And on your computer, you can listen to this broadcast live at KLAV1230am.com. This show rebroadcasts on VegasAllNetRadio.com every Friday at 5 o'clock p.m. So please visit that website. That's VegasAllNetRadio.com. Aspects of Writing has also branched out, and we mentor people when it comes to self-publishing. So just visit us at MammothStarPublishing.com. Until next time, this is your host, James Kelly, reminding you, if you can dream it, you can write it. Rob, thank you so much.
Thank
Dana, Janet.
Hey, fantastic show. Rob, nice meeting you.
Thank you.